Ah, Good morning and welcome to the first of some lectures. They'll be very short, about 5 to 10 minutes long. And first, I want to kind of tell you when I was in college, getting ready to become a biology teacher, I decided to take a plant biology course. And it was a really interesting class. Not a lot of students, as you can imagine, but it was a fun class, and one of the things they talked about was this idea about how plants respond to internal and external signals. So we're going to kind of talk about plant responses. All right, so they're rooted in place and they can't move. So how does a plant respond? How does it change? And so it turns out that many of these signals that we have in these directions and stuff are all controlled by these cellular receptors in a process very similar to what you see here. So what you're looking at is a potato, and these are the growing stems or shoots coming out from the potato. They're called eyes. Maybe you've heard of the eyes of a potato. And when you expose them to light, then the plant begins to grow green leaves. So it's very sensitive to knowing when it's in the soil, no light, and it stays as a root. And then when you shine light on it, then it knows to convert those shoots into leaves. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about is this idea of signal transduction. So you know that these internal and external signals are detected by receptors. These proteins then change in response to a specific stimuli. A secondary messenger will then transfer and amplify those signals from receptors to proteins, and this is going to cause some kind of transduction, and then finally a response. Now, this signal transduction pathway leads to regulation of one or more cellular activities. In most cases, these responses to stimulation involve increased activity of enzymes. Transcription factors will bind directly to specific regions of the DNA and control transcription genes, or there'll be post-translational modifications, which will be involving activation of existing proteins in that signal response. So maybe something here in the translation process, or maybe something here at the proteins at the membranes. Hormones are then chemical signals that coordinate those different parts of an organism. So by definition, these chemicals that play out are going to be important for how a plant responds. So any response that you see in plants, we call them tropisms. So tropisms are this movement towards or away a stimulus. So the movement away towards light, movement towards or away water, movement up towards or away gravity. These are all called plant tropisms. Now, many of them are caused by hormones. There's a surprise. So in the late 1800s, Charles Darwin and his son Francis conducted experiments on what we call phototropism. That's the plant's response to light. In fact, it was modeled on the activity that you did earlier this week. So they thought that maybe there was something in the coleoptile that was needed to make the plant grow, or in this case, bend towards light. So it turned out that light would somehow affect which direction the plant would bend towards. So they designed an experiment in the 1800s, and they removed the tip, they covered the tip, and then they put these opaque covers. And what they came to find out is that light inhibits the movement of a hormone called auxin, whereas on the shady side, the movement of auxin is allowed to move across from cell to cell. Now, in reality, they're not growing. This is the region of the plant that elongates. So what auxins actually do, this chemical hormone, will cause these cells here to fill up with water. And as they fill up with water, they enlarge. The ones on the side, where the light is facing, are inhibited, and so they don't fill up with water. And so as a result, the plant actually is bending towards light, but not growing towards light. Okay, so this was done in the 1800s. And of course, now we have this process of other plant hormones. So these other plant hormones will control cell division, elongation, making plants parts into flowers or making fruit. All of these are controlled by hormones. And what was interesting from my college lectures is it was really, really hard to find these plant hormones because just a small amount in the plant can have a grand effect on the whole plant itself. So these hormones are produced in very, very low concentrations. And so here's a list of the hormones that are in plants. These are the major ones. Part of our experiment that you did with on paper was dealing with the one called auxids. But there's also another one that's part of stems and roots. It's called cytokinins. Abscisic acid is used as a way to prevent plants from growing. Ethylene is used for plants fruiting. So each one, gibberellins are the ones that are going to make the stems grow longer. And so all of these have some effect on our plants. But can plants talk to each other?
The smell of freshly cut grass brings to mind summer vacation and picnics in the park. Pleasant associations, at least for us. For plants, that same scent is a harbinger of serious danger. When a plant is injured, say by the spinning blades of a lawnmower or a very hungry caterpillar, pungent chemicals pour out of the wounds, waft into the air, and stick in our noses, and also to the leaves and stems of nearby plants. Over many generations, eavesdropping plants have evolved to interpret each different combination of compounds as the signature of a specific imminent threat. The scent that corresponds to caterpillar, for example, prompts plants like tomato and tobacco to churn out bitter toxins in their leaves, making them yucky. Plants can actively communicate too. Some, like corn and cotton, can summon other animals as defenders. They emit bouquets of chemical compounds that attract parasitic wasps, which inject their eggs into the nutritiously plump caterpillars so the larvae can eat them from the inside out. Teamwork! Plants gossip below ground as well. If you seal the tops of tomato plants in airtight plastic bags and expose one of them to a harmful leaf disease, the healthy plants will detect their neighbor's illness and begin making antibiotic compounds. We don't know exactly how this communication happens, but it's probably through the extensive network of beneficial fungi that help plant roots absorb and share water and nutrients. However, plants can also use what they learn about their neighbors for nefarious purposes. Parasitic daughter vines sniff out and steer towards their preferred hosts instead of flailing around blindly. Another vine somehow grows leaves of different shapes and sizes to match those of the tree or shrub it's climbing on, using its host for both support and camouflage. Whatever the purpose, self-defense, parasitism, or mimicry, plants have been chatting and eavesdropping in complex social networks since long before Facebook, texting, or even... If anything, we took a leaf from their book.
Okay, so this concludes the first part of our lecture about plant hormones. And then we're going to kind of talk about hormones in animals. And then eventually what we're going to do is talk about this idea about how these plants and animals work together to make this idea of a parasitic wasp attacking this caterpillar, which I think you'll remember from your video you just saw. All right, wait for part 2.